security, I think we are doing more with our partners in the Border Patrol than we've ever done before. There's a couple operations we're currently doing with the Border Patrol. For instance, we can talk about alien transfer exit programs called ATEP, where if a Mexican national crosses the border illegally in Texas, rather than just turn them back around in Texas, they make multiple reentries. We take custody of them, we detain them, we transport them to another state for removal. That separates them from the alien smuggling organizations, so you're hurting the criminal smuggling organization, and that cuts down the recidivism, because now the alien's out of his area. He doesn't know the area, so chances are he's not going to cross again.
I'm glad to hear we're making progress, but let me ask you, is our border secure? Is our southern border secure?
Ma'am, I don't have resources on the border. We do not control the border.
Mr. Murphy, is our southern border secure?
I think we're working toward that end.
Is it now? If I go home this weekend, can I tell my constituents, and they're going to ask, is our border secure? What should I say? What would you say if you were me?
We're doing our best.
Mr. Fisher, what would you say?
I would say in certain sections along the border, that is in fact true. The border is secure.
Can you
but
give
not in
us
all
the sections where it's not secure? Can you show us a map and show us where it's not secure?
In some locations, we would.
Can you
identify
advise us,
areas.
in those locations, those some locations where you can tell us, can you tell us how to make it secure?
Right, we're in the process of building that right now. It's
And when will that process be completed?
probably in the next few months.
Would you, when you get it, are you going to share it with us?
It would be my intent to do so, but that would not be my call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Illinois, Mrs. Kelly.
I just had another question about the data. Clearly, the Border Patrol also collects data other than apprehensions, and the Government Accountability Office has also reviewed this data. For instance, GAO analyzed the percentage of repeat border crossers and found that figure had declined also between 2006 and 2011. Ms. Gambler, do these indicators paint roughly the same picture as apprehensions, that the number of illegal border crossings may have declined over the last 6 years, and what else do you think they tell us?
The recidivism rate data that we looked at covered the period from fiscal year 2008 to 2011, and it found that the recidivism rate across the southwest border decreased by 6% during that time. The recidivism rate looks at estimated known illegal entrants who were apprehended more than once, and so it's not exactly the same. It's not exactly the same as looking at data on just apprehension. So it's looking at the number who've been apprehended more than once.
Okay, thank you. Also, just wanted to make a comment that I totally understand on both sides of the aisle in this committee that when we call someone, we expect the person to be here and expect the person to answer our questions. But I also is my understanding that the gentleman has offered to sit down with staff. So just want to make sure we give him a little credit for that. But I, too, agree that when we call people, they should come to session. But from my understanding that he has offered to sit down with staff. So thank you.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's go back to the identifications that are used for entry at the border. Either of you gentlemen, Mr. Fisher or Mr. Murphy, are you familiar with any of the technical boards that approve the credentials that are used for crossing the border, Mr. Fisher?
I am not, no.
Mr. Murphy?
No, sir.
See, this is why it's so difficult to conduct this hearing without someone responsible from DHS who can answer these questions. But we have at least 5 documents I cited. None of them have dual biometric capability. The acting commissioner and the chief do not. Did you know, Mr. Fisher, if, again, those documents can be used by themselves, either Global Entry, Nexus, or FAST or Sentry?
I don't know that, sir. That's not my area of expertise.
Well, again, I think as Chief of U.S. Border Customs and Protection, you should know which documents can be used. I'm not able to question, again, whether or not there's any coordination in the development of those documents and what they contain, the capability that they contain. How many individuals were apprehended last year, Mr. Holman? Maybe you've already told the subcommittee, crossing the borders illegally.
I don't have the number of the aliens, illegal aliens crossing the border. What I can tell you is that we arrested, processed, and removed 410,000.
You remove 410,000 back to their original point of entry or whatever country they came from?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many then are incarcerated in the United States, say, last year at any time? Would that be all of them, and is there a population of illegals in our prisons?
Yeah, out of the 410,000 we removed last year, 225 of those were convicted criminals. And we got them from
225, period, were convicted.
225,000.
225,000.
Yeah, 55% of the 410,000 were convicted criminals.
Okay. And do you detain those convicted criminals?
Yes. Our strategic approach, we have 4 priorities. Those that are a threat to national security and community safety, which are convicted criminals, recent border entrants, and
So
those that are fugitives. That remain our
taxpayers
priorities.
put the cost while they're in prison. Do we also pay for their legal cost? Do you have any idea if they're all granted? Are they read any rights?
No, we're administrative process. After they do if they get convicted of crime, they do their time in whatever state or federal facility, we get them after the fact. And we do try to process them for removal while they're still in the custody of the law enforcement agency, so we don't incur unnecessary costs.
But are they entitled to any kind of legal counsel that we provide, or they can get their own counsel?
They can get their own counsel on administrative removal procedures, not entitled to a paid attorney.
They're not. Okay. Any idea as to the cost of incarcerating these individuals?
In our custody or in the custody of law enforcement?
Both. Both. What's your cost, and is there an estimate on the cost of incarceration by others?
ERO is funded at 34,000 beds a year, and those beds turn over quickly. Our funding for detention operations is about $1.7 billion.
Mm-hmm. I saw a number of Customs and Border Patrol people were killed historically, maybe the last decade. Have most of the culprits been apprehended? Mr. Murphy, Mr. Fisher, do you know?
Over the last few years, there have been arrests of individuals who have, there was enough evidence to warrant their arrest that were attributed to violence against Border Patrol agents, and in some cases, the killings of Border Patrol agents and CBP officers.
I remember working with Reagan administration when they killed Kiki Camarena, and I think the way Reagan handled it is he closed the borders for a while. But we still have people who haven't been apprehended who have killed our agents.
That is true.
Correct? Okay. That's kind of a sad commentary. I think we need to do everything possible to target those individuals. Might be a good use of drones, but to take them out when you kill an enforcement officer or Border Patrol personnel of the United States, yield back the balance.
Did you have any more questions?
No, and though I would like if the staff could send a letter, and I've asked a response on this paying twice as much. I guess they divided up the contract between a couple of vendors, and one of the pieces of equipment I understand cost twice as much as the other. It's nice to divide the contract, but I don't really care about that. I'm looking at the taxpayers. It has the same capabilities, but I want to find out about that mobile surveillance equipment, the acquisition, the cost of the equipment, difference in any capability, and what would justify paying twice as much for the same thing. And we will have the meeting with the chair of the subcommittee and the full committee chair on calling in the DHS witness. Other than that, again, appreciate the courtesy.
Thank you. I have a few more questions. Mr. Fisher, you testified earlier that part of the border is secure and other parts are not. What parts of the border are unsecure?
These would be areas where generally we don't have access to the immediate border. We don't have full-time deployments of Border Patrol agents, and we have very little or, in many cases, non-existent technology. And it's only in those areas where intelligence leads us to believe that criminal organizations may be exploiting those areas. We adjust our resources accordingly. That's what I meant by, in some cases, the border is more secure than in others.
Okay, so what percentage is unsecure?
I don't have a percentage, sir. It's very difficult to identify a percentage.
Miles?
It's even harder to distinguish miles because it fluctuates.
Pardon me? What area? Yeah, what particular areas? Texas, New Mexico, Arizona?
All across the southwest border, there are sections that are considered secure and other sections that are less secure. It's a good example. If you look at, there's a 5-mile stretch in San Diego, my recent post as a chief in San Diego. That 5 miles is between San Ysidro Port of Entry and the Otay Mesa Port of Entry. You may have visited it in one of your recent border tours. That section of the border has been pointed out to me over the last couple of years, that's exactly what we need the whole southwest border to look like. Because there, within that 5-mile stretch, CBP has put over the years single fence. We've had all-weather roads. There's a secondary fence that's about between 15 and 18 feet high. On top of that secondary fence, we have razor wire, triple strand, by the way, across that. There are hundreds of unattended ground sensors that are in and around that secondary fence area. We have integrated fixed towers that provide 7x24 surveillance, and Border Patrol agents routinely deploy that. Very little people cross that section of the border. However, if you also look over the last 10 years of the predominance in tunneling activity along the southwest border,
Mr. Fisher,
that area is the most exploited.
Thank you, but I'm looking for what part of the border is unsecure. You had mentioned that it's part of the border is secure, the other part is unsecure. Or now you're saying, backpedaling, saying it's not as secure. Well, it's either secure or not secure.
Well, that's a really interesting point, sir, because really when you're looking at security, it's not an either-or proposition. It's really the state of the border at any particular time. Any section of the border that we say is secure is potentially continuing to be exploited.
Right. Yeah. You said part of the border is less secure.
That's correct.
Okay. So you're saying at certain times all of the border is unsecure and sometimes it is secure?
No,
I'm really confused because, I'd like to help you fix the border and make sure it's secure 100% of the time, 24/7.
Right.
But you're telling me part of the border is not secure. What geographical area, whatever, is unsecure?
There are certain segments in the area, we're talking about Arizona earlier in the West Desert, in and around the Tohono O'odham Nation. That's one particular area where I would qualify right now is we have less security in that particular area than we do in other parts of Arizona.
Do you have a map? Can you get a map?
I can get a map. I don't have one with me.
Okay, I'd like to see a map. I'm an old soldier, and my perimeter is going to be secure. When I go to sleep at night, I want to know that I've got people out there to protect my perimeter.
Understood, sir.
You know how it works, right?
I do.
Okay, Americans want to go to sleep at night knowing their perimeter is secure. And I want to know, like a soldier, what part is the weakest, what is the strongest, and what can we do to fix it?
Certainly.
Okay?
That's understandable.
Great. Thanks. And I have just a few more questions. I was just reading a blog from, what did I do with that? Excuse me here, Debbie Schuskol. She's a blogger. What does she mean by the term reverse escort? Can any of you answer that question? Mr. Homan.
I can answer that question. The activity in Rio Grande Valley has spiked a couple months ago, has since went down, but we've seen an increase in other than Mexican arrests. Citizens from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, the three major populations. We have a congressionally mandated cap on overtime. My office is going to make so much in overtime, and a lot of the arrests the Border Patrol is making is unaccompanied juveniles. These are nationals under the age of 18. We are only allowed to detain them up to 72 hours before we turn them over to Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement. So with the surge in the unaccompanied alien juvenile arrest that we got into custody, we are by law and statute are supposed to turn them over to HSS. They have facilities all across the country. When we contact them saying we have a juvenile in custody, where do we take them? We have to deliver that unaccompanied juvenile to them so they can place them in a facility comparable for a juvenile. My officers were doing so many escorts of these juveniles, they're bumping up against the overtime cap. So the cost is the same. For an officer to go from San Antonio to Detroit to drop off a juvenile with Health and Human Services and then fly back to San Antonio is a fixed cost. Since we're bouncing up against the cap, what we're asking the other officers to do, rather than having this guy exceed the cap, we're having the Detroit officer fly down to San Antonio, pick up the juvenile, and take him back to Detroit. Same costs across the board. What it is it's a way to deal with our budget and way to deal with the mandate of the limit of overtime we can pay our officers.
So according to the blog, they're saying that immigration agents are dropping them off in sanctuaries, awaiting amnesty.
That's not accurate. My officers turn them over to Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement. Now, they have contracts for certain people that detain the juvenile and make sure he gets medical and gets his food until he gets a hearing from the immigration judge and gets ordered removed. You would have to talk to Health and Human Services how they build that contract out and who they contract with the house of juveniles, but that's totally taken out of context.
Okay, so the other question is, why would you fly a juvenile or anybody from Texas or Arizona or New Mexico to Detroit to await trial or some kind of disposition? Because
Health and Human Services ran out of beds in Texas. They have contracts all over the country. Juvenile aliens are arrested all over the 50 states. Because of the surge in the Rio Grande Valley, Health and Human Services ran out of contract beds in Texas. So now Health and Human Services tells us, okay, here's where's the availability to take care of this child. Here's where you bring them. So again, that's a Health and Human Services call on where their contracts are for bedding. Okay. Now I want to get back to, thank you, by the way. Appreciate it, sir.
Clarifying that. What, this catch and release thing, you have, like I toured Eloy, that's a holding facility, prison? What do you call it?
It's a detention facility.
Detention facility, thank you. Now, I understand you don't have so much bed space.
We are funded for 34,000 beds.
34 at Eloy?
No.
Or 1,500 and something?
Yes, approximately.
1,560 or 34 or something like, about 1,500, right?
Approximately.
And if all those beds are filled, and all the beds are filled, and you have 30 that you just caught, where do they go?
Well, at the beginning of the year, we actually had over 37,000 in custody. We're actually overburning the budget because of our strong, we got an enforcement strategy that makes sense. What we do is if we are completely full and we're beyond budget, as aliens come into custody, we need to make a determination. Is there somebody sitting in a bed that is a non-criminal, a non-mandatory case? Maybe he has U.S. citizen kids. Maybe he's got a child serving in the armed forces. Can we take him, put him on an alternative form of detention, maybe an ankle bracelet, GPS monitoring, release him, and make that bed available for the priority case? We save our beds for priority cases, which are criminal aliens, those with threats to national security, and recent border crossers. We actually increased the beds in Texas to make sure that we can detain recent border crossers, because I think that's an important border control strategy. So I've heard Border Patrol agents tell me that they get like a message saying where beds are filled, and they don't respond to, or they don't make a real big effort capturing all the 26. They maybe only capture 3 or 4. Is that accurate, or No, what I can tell you is, as a matter of practice, we detain all recent border entrants. We have brought on a couple thousand more beds in Texas to deal with the influx. There are situations where somebody's released from our custody. We release people every day, like every jail does. Maybe we can't get a travel document. He's from a country, for instance, Somalia. Maybe we can't get a travel document to Somalia. We have a Supreme Court decision in Zabidas that says we can only detain someone up to 6 months. If there's no significant likelihood of removal, we must release them as long as he's not a danger to the community. So as Border Patrol gives us the aliens, we make it a priority to detain those aliens. But there are times, if they're an unaccompanied juvenile, we'll turn them over to HSS, so they're released from our custody. If they claim fear and they get their interview by CIS, and CIS finds a fear claim positive, then that alien becomes eligible for bond. So we release aliens all the time on bond, if they meet bond set by the judge. If there's a humanitarian concern, maybe an alien that comes to our detention, we find out it's a sole caregiver for a child, and that person's not a danger to the community, he might be served better on an alternative form of detention.
Okay, thank you. We've heard reports of significant increases in other than Mexicans, OTMs, crossing our southwest border. In fact, Chairman Chaffetz tweeted about 9 Romanians apprehended crossing the southwest border during his recent trip, and some Arizona news outlets are reporting an increase in Indian nationals, more than 1,000 since January this year, crossing in that state. What other countries are they coming from?
The big majority right now, in order, is Guatemala. It's big as Honduras and El Salvador. And let me explain what we did with that. We were bringing in so many OTMs into custody, we got way over 37,000. So what I did, I instructed my staff to meet with the governments of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras and start a pilot program. Usually these nationals are in detention for 10 to 20 days before a government official of Guatemala would interview them, because they have to interview them, make sure they're a national of their country, then they issue a travel document. It took 20 days, so the beds were backing up. What I did is issue an instruction to start a pilot program with the agreement from the governments. We've made equipment available for Guatemala and Honduras. They're doing the interviews now through a pilot program within 24 hours. They're issuing a travel document within 24 hours. I reassigned some flight hours to Central American flights, so we surged Central American flights. In the last 2 weeks, we removed over 5,000 OTMs to their country through this pilot program, so that got my bed level down. As far as the East Indians in Arizona, CBP can speak to that, but it's my understanding, because we're getting them in custody, they're actually surrendering themselves at a port of entry and claiming fear. And at that point, the process is we'll contact CIS. CIS arranges an interview and tries to make determination, is that fear credible? And if they make that determination, yes, he has a substantiated credible fear of returning to his homeland, then that alien becomes eligible for release, either under bond or under supervised release.
Yeah. They're claiming fear. These 9 Romanians, it was my understanding they went to trial or they went before a judge, were released on bond of some sort, and never showed back up.
I'm unfamiliar with the Romanians. I know the East Indian issue because there's well over 1,000 we've gotten our detention that we're dealing with CIS. I'm unfamiliar with the Romanian case. Last year we removed aliens from over 150 countries, so we see aliens from every country on the planet.
Okay, and walk me through this. You have somebody comes to Eloy, they go before a judge, and
on Mexican nationals, we can turn them around pretty quickly. On OTMs, before we can remove them to their homeland, they have to be interviewed by officials of their country to ascertain that, yeah, they are in fact a citizen of Guatemala. After that interview, the Guatemalan government will issue a travel document that identifies the person as a national of that country, and that allows us to repatriate them to that country. That's the process. So when we arrest somebody and they're an OTM, we set them up for an immigration hearing. They'll see an immigration judge if that's what they request a hearing.
how many show up for the hearing?
It depends.
After you release them?
It depends. If they're released under some sort of order of supervision, maybe ankle bracelet, the ATD shows about 80% show rate at the hearing. Those released on OR, of course, the appearance rate is lower. But what the Border Patrol is doing in a smart way is those arrested crossing the border, Border Patrol will process them as an expedited removal. And expedited removal is a removal order in itself, so they don't have to see a judge. When the Border Patrol processes them as expedited removal, they come to my custody. We get a quick interview from the government, the hosting government. They issue a travel document, remove them. The only time the hearing comes into effect is after the claimant fear they get to go through an CIS and later an immigration judge. Or if they're not an expedited removal case, if we arrest them in the interior, we can't process them expedited removal. We have to give them a notice to appear in front of an immigration judge.
Okay, what percentage of OTMs do you have like an average number in a holding or detention facility?
At the time we started a pilot, we had approximately 34,000 in custody, and we had approximate around 7,000 to 8,000 OTMs.
OTMs. So the rest are
Citizens of Mexico.
citizens of Mexico. Okay, and the 80% show up for this?
The ATD metric, when we release somebody on an ATD ankle bracelet, the appearance rate on that and other forms of reporting, which it could be telephonic reporting, could be an officer doing a bed check at the residence, we have about 80% appearance rate for those released on alternatives to detention.
So that leaves 20% did not appear.
Yes, sir.
And how many people is that, approximately? Give me a number.
Well, it's hard to give. I can tell you, that's what we.
10,000? I mean, you're talking 400,000 people you processed?
Yeah, we actually had intake of 475,000 last year. We removed 410,000. Some are still fighting their cases.
Yeah.
We have some cases that go to an immigration court. They'll get a final order of removal. Then they'll appeal that to the BIA, Board of Immigration Appeals. Then they can even go further and appeal once more to the circuit court. We have a lot of aliens with final orders sitting in our beds that we can't remove because they have appeals pending.
Yeah, so you have 400,000 plus. 20% of that is about simple math, 80,000 people never show back up.
Our current fugitive operation backlog, that's people who have been ordered removed and have fled, they have not been removed, is 462,000, the latest count.
462,000, and the news reports or media reports, 11 million illegal in this country. And somebody told me it's closer to 20 million. Somebody else told me 30 million.
Well, I've heard the $11 million figure. That's why I think what ICE is doing is smart and effective enforcement, that knowing that we can remove 400,000 aliens, that's what we're staffed for and budgeted for, 400,000. I think a smart way to do that, is it going to be the first 400,000 that we encounter, the first 400,000 in the door? I think our policy that focusing on the criminal aliens, those are the threats to national security, I like to think that we can decide who those 400,000 are going to be. The more criminals they are, the safer our communities are. We make a bigger impact, so our policy is clear. Let us decide who that 400,000 is going to be if that's all we can do. And let's make as many of them community safety factors as possible. That makes our community safer. Like I mentioned earlier, 225,000 criminal aliens we removed last year. That is a significant impact on community safety. Not even to mention the recidivism rate, around 50%. How many crimes did we prevent by removing that many criminal aliens?
Okay, 225, that's half of the 400.
55%.
55.
And if you look at the 410,000, 96% then fell into our priorities. Either they're 55% were criminal aliens, and the rest of the 96% were either fugitives, those who were ordered, removed, and re-entered, which makes them a re-entry, or the recent border entrants.
And
recent border entrants remain a main priority for us because we need to secure the border.
And a second illegal entry is a felony.
If they've been ordered removed formally by an immigration judge and they re-enter, we catch them, they can be prosecuted for 8 U.S.C. 1326, which is a felony, re-entry after deportation.
Okay. Do you agree with other law enforcement professionals who are concerned that the rise in OTM correlates to the rise in smuggling operations coming out of Mexico?
I think the rise in the OTM apprehensions, a vast majority of them are being smuggled by smuggling organizations operating out of Mexico.
Thank you. And I have, one last question. Do you have one? Go down the panel. Yes, thanks. When I was at Eloy, they gave me a daily report, and I think it was a sheet of paper with all the countries, I guess, in the world, right? And there was a little space next to it. And every day, somebody would fill out that report and write the number that were being held at that facility in that little space on the sheet of paper. Is that like a daily report?
I'm unfamiliar with that. That might be something that facility does, but we track every alien in custody, where they're from, who they are, how long they've been in custody through an electronic database.
Well, it concerns me. I saw all the people, that they were holding, or all the countries that were represented in that facility. And knowing that, from what I've seen, that we don't capture 100%. I mean, we don't. But the one thing that bothered me the most was there was the number 1 next to the country Afghanistan. And that I don't know why, but that just, I mean, it really played on me. And I'm just wondering if if we don't capture everybody, how many that we didn't capture from that particular country, because that's of concern to me. I'm sure a lot of other people. But anyway, that just, I guess that's why I stay awake at night sometimes when I think about this border and the problems we have there. Operational control is often described as a strategy that is used by DHS and CBP to describe their operations and security in U.S. borders. What do you view as the biggest threat to the security of our borders, Mr. Fisher, and we'll go right down the line.
Certainly the biggest threat, as I would describe it, would be those individuals that seek and wake up each and every day thinking about nothing else but to do harm to this country. That is our number 1 threat, and that's what our strategy looks to target.
What does that mean?
I'm sorry, sir, could you?
Yeah. Well,
Your question had to do with how we evaluate threat along the border and what that threat is?
yeah. What do you think the biggest risk is, and how are we responding to that risk? To give me an example, I just gave you there was one person there from Afghanistan, and right now we're fighting a war in Afghanistan. Common sense, why is somebody from Afghanistan sneaking into our country or trying to? They're being held in Eloy prison at the time. And then I hear we have 11 million illegals. And we're not 100% secure. You yourself said the border is not secure. And somebody who wants to do us harm is going to exploit our weaknesses and our weak points in our border. It's my job as the congressman to protect this country, number 1 priority in the Constitution. And you're telling me our border is not secure, and I would like to know what you think the biggest threat to the security of our borders is, and what risk. Can you give me a percentage?
Well, first, Congressman, I do share the same responsibilities as you as a Chief United States Border Patrol, and I, along with the other agents, took the same oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Within that framework and the strategy in which we've implemented over the last couple of years, specifically the threat that still, as you mentioned, keeps me up as well, is those individuals, potential terrorists that are seeking entry into this country and may do so between the ports of entry. We build a strategy and try to identify what the requirements are to minimize the likelihood that those individuals, if they're inclined to get into this country in that manner, we're able to detect them and we're able to apprehend them when they do so. If you're looking at threats as or vulnerabilities as established geographically, I can't give you certain segments of miles and I can't give you percentages. I can give another example outside of the West Desert in Arizona, a place like South Texas, where the border is separated by the Rio Grande Valley in areas where we generally don't have a lot of detection capability. We don't have impediments like we do in other places, like 12 or 15-foot fences. In areas right now where we see the vast majority of individuals seeking entry are within those areas in the Rio Grande Valley. So from a regional standpoint, a vulnerability is in the Rio Grande Valley.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes, sir. I believe it's terrorists and implements of terror, and I think one of the things that we've done is, again, we've pushed our borders back, both from air traffic, the passengers. We know who's coming. We know it well in advance of them even boarding planes. We know what's coming from a cargo. We get that information in advance. At our land board port of entries and at our seaports, we have our RPMs, so our radiation detection devices. But I believe that's That's where we've really done the most work as far as identifying that threat ahead of time. We denied boarding to 4,200 people in 2012. These are potentially high-risk individuals that could have come to this country to do harm.
We want 100% border security, and we don't have it. And one from Afghanistan comes in, and that's all it takes is one. Mr. Holman?
Like you, sir, I've carried a badge and gun for 29 years. I think I care about the security of this country, and I think it's my job to protect the security of this country and security of our communities. So I think the biggest threat is those that want to come to this country and do harm, but in two different fashions, both terrorism, which the other side of the House and HSI division, that's a priority project they work on is investigations of a national security nature. But I think also important is safety of the communities for those that come here and want to commit crimes, not only enter the country illegally, but then commit a crime against a citizen of this country. I've been doing this for a long time, and there was a time when I was a street agent, we just go out and arrest aliens because they're here in violation of law, and I'm enforcing immigration law. But at the end of the day, what impact did I make? At the same time I'm arresting this person that's here illegally, but maybe hasn't committed another crime, there's a child predator walking out of state prison because we didn't have presence in all the jails across the country. This administration, and I truly believe this, has done a lot for community safety. By deploying secure communities across the country, we have a virtual presence in every jail. When the alien gets arrested and fingerprinted, we're going to find out about that alien, and we can take action on him and remove him from the country. The strategy ICE has built on prioritizing what we do, on national security threat aliens, aliens that are a threat to public safety, it makes sense to me. It's the right thing to do. If we can only, as I said before, if we're built to remove 400,000 people, let's make that 400,000 count. So I think what we're doing now makes sense. I've been doing this 29 years. I think we're in a better spot now than we've been in years.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gambler?
The Border Patrol has identified threats to border security from terrorism, from drug smuggling, and from illegal migration. The Border Patrol is working on developing some risk assessment tools to help assess what those risks are and help inform its identification of resources, and that's in process right now.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all our witnesses for taking time from their busy schedules to appear before us today. The committee stands adjourned. Yep. Excellent job, sir. Yeah.
O al contrario, que te emociones.
Tranquilito. No, tranquilito. Imagínate con frío o ¿qué quieres? No.
¿Prefieres no alevestado?
No. Normalito, tranquilito.
Ah, no, pero estaría divertido.
Pues para ustedes. No, pues imagínate yo ahí tapándome.
Bueno, pues él es Pablo Lail y no va a salir con una hojita de parra. Ninguna hojita de parra. Nada. Nada. ¿Y caminan, se pasean y todo, pero la verdad la historia no es nada fea, no es, aunque salen totalmente desnudos, no se siente, está muy padre.
No, la obra lo pide y es una obra que además tuvo mucho éxito hace muchos años.
Sí.
O sea, sí es una muy buena obra porque se justifica, aunque suene trillado, sí se justifican los desnudos.
Bueno, pero quitando lo de los desnudos, son chavos nuevos que están empezando. ¿Cómo trabajan ellos?
Trabajan muy bien y sobre todo que la obra se trata de cómo son las parejas hoy en día. Increíble que se escribió hace 20 años, porque estaba como que previendo cómo iba a ser hoy. Porque hace 20 años los chavos no eran así, que nada se toman en serio, que juegan, que te sablean.
A lo mejor le están adaptando un poco.
Claro, la tienen que actualizar. Que andan contigo para ver qué te sacan. O sea, es increíble porque hazte cuenta que estábamos... ¿A poco hay hombres así? No, pues pregúntale a Paulina, yo no conozco.
Oigan, vamos a cambiar de tema. Gracias, Shani, que estuvo muy linda tu entrevista. Estoy orgullosa de ti. Hoy les tenemos la segunda parte de la sección Ídolos, dedicada a Rocío Banquels, quien recuerda que cuando estaba en su gran momento de gloria y de fama, una terrible enfermedad la postró en una silla de ruedas. ¿Quieren saber qué fue?
Ya me hice un nombre como cantante, la gente conoce, la gente me habla de Luna Mágica como si lo hubiera grabado el año pasado.
Además de su gran calidad histriónica, Rocío Banquels posee una voz privilegiada que la hizo ser una de las cantantes más representativas de la balada en la década de los 80. Fue en 1973, en la obra de teatro Vaselina, donde se descubrió a Rocío, la cantante.
Entré a sustituir a Bárbara Ramson, que ella cantaba, ella hacía Licha en el personaje de Vaselina y cantaba Freddy, mi amor. Y entonces Julissa y Ben Ibarra me dijeron, te la avientas porque sabemos que cantas. Yo les decía, yo nomás canto la regadera.
Freddy, mi amor, te extraño más de lo que crees. Freddy, mi amor, día con día te escribiré.
Del 85 a 10, 12 años después fue puro cantar. Y pues te presentabas en los grandes programas como Siempre no me acuerdo del señor Velasco, con los programas de Eco, en fin, ¿no? Todos los programas que en esa época había teníamos esa puerta, los cantantes.
Los musicales le han permitido combinar el canto con la actuación y es ahí donde se consolida como una de las actrices de teatro musical más solicitadas en México, participando en importantes musicales como Mamma Mía, La Bella y la Bestia y Jesucristo Superestrella, entre otros.
El gran actor siempre lo verás en teatro. El que no es el gran actor le da miedo estar en un teatro. Entonces, para mí, pues esta es la gran escuela. A mí el teatro, el escenario de teatro, me enseñó a sacar a flote a la cantante.
Pero también es en un escenario teatral donde comienza la historia de una enfermedad que la pone al borde de la muerte.
Yo cuando hice Evita en 1981, tuve un problema de pulmonía y la única manera de que yo siguiera cantando Evita, que es una ópera rock muy difícil, era inyectarme cortisona.
No llores por mí, Argentina, tu hija no te abandona. Yo he sufrido y padecido.
Nadie sabíamos que yo era alérgica a ese medicamento y se me deshicieron mis huesos. Me sugerían todos los ortopedistas que fui a ver aquí en México que no me operara, que la fuera librando como pudiera y que pues con medicamento y analgésicos soportara el dolor.
Rocío comienza una verdadera lucha contra el dolor y la desesperanza. La cantante y la actriz se bajan del escenario para subirse a una silla de ruedas.
Me venció el cuerpo, me venció la mente, me venció la voluntad y me tuve que sentar en una silla de ruedas. Sé lo que es ser minusválida, sé que no hay fuerza más grande que tu propia voluntad, que nadie te va a sacar adelante más que tú misma.
La admirada villana de muchas historias comienza a vivir experiencias que solo las había vivido en sus personajes de telenovela.
Muy dolorosas en su momento, tanto físicas como intelectual, como emocional, como tú, porque pues dejas de servir, deja tú como artista, dejas de servir como mujer, ¿no? Entonces, cuando cuando tú te ves a una edad en la que no debes de ser dependiente, depender de tus hijos y depender de un dolor o de una pastilla para que te quite el dolor, pues es terrible. Además, el mismo dolor te hace en un momento dado, pues claro que quieres agarrar la toalla, el tenis, los calzones y todo lo que tengas para aventarlo y decir, ya qué hago aquí, ¿no? Y haz de cuenta que se abrió así la tierra y vi que yo me sentía hasta que ya más bajo de lo que yo estaba ya no podía estar. Pero cuando me pasó ese momento en mi vida, vi que había, que hay que tú quieras que haya, ahí hay. Hasta que tú pares y digas, no, hasta aquí voy a llegar y órale, a voltear para arriba, ¿no? Yo no volteaba para arriba, yo nada más volteaba para abajo.
Con admirable fuerza, Rocío comienza a mirar el cielo.
Aprendí a ser guerrera, a luchar y a salir adelante. Y pues creo que lo he logrado.
El amor, la relación con su hermana y su cuñado Alfredo Adame y el resurgimiento de Rocío Banquels en la tercera y última parte de Ídolos.
Cuando vienes dolida de muchas cosas, ¿verdad? No es fácil que un hombre te entienda y se puede uno convertir en la villana. Y a mí no me gusta ser la villana en la vida real. Yo no tengo nada que hablar de él, ¿no? Ni agarrarme de su fama, ni mucho menos. Yo creo que empecé mi carrera muchísimos años antes que él y retomé, regresé y me ha costado trabajo este segundo volver a empezar.
Para hoy, soy Bárbara Barquín.
Qué historia, ¿no?
Y fíjate que una vez ella me contó que cuando deja la silla de ruedas, que todavía no podía ni caminar ni nada, o sea, ya empezaba a caminar, y es cuando la invitan a que fuera juez del programa que cantaba.
Cantando por un sueño.
Y entonces era bajar una escalera y ella no podía caminar. Wow. Y no quería decir nada porque se me van a quitar de aquí o lo que sea. Entonces se arma de valor, está arriba de las escaleras y sin poder ni siquiera todavía apoyar bien las piernas, dice, mira, no sé dónde agarré las fuerzas, le pedí a Dios y bajé las escaleras.
Wow.
Y todo por la cortisona, ¿eh?
Pero es que yo no sabía que era alérgica.
Pero ¿a cuánta gente no le ha dañado la cortisona?
Pero es que no es que seas alérgica, porque la cortisona más bien te cura cualquier alergia, te la bloquea. Pero los cuerpos la reciben de diferente manera y en exceso es pésima, es un esteroide.
Te hincha, ¿no?
Qué bueno que ya traes tu camisa de mantel de fiesta.
¿Verdad? Sí, la agarré en friega. Sí, son igual que las tuyas, es tuya, creo, negro. Dice acá atrás, negro.
Oye, el conejo hablando de planificación familiar.
Sí. Los seres humanos anhelamos en paz interior, ¿no? La sociedad de repente nos confunde, te dice que el éxito profesional, el dinero, ¿no? Si no tienes paz interior, puedes tener eso y no estar feliz. Claro. Y puedes tener paz interior y no tener eso y estar feliz, ¿no? O sea que la base es la paz interior. Y tengo muy buenas noticias para todos los mexicanos. Hablando de este mensaje de paz, pero diciéndote cómo es tan sencillo alcanzarlo, porque es algo que ya está dentro de ti. Nada más que de repente
nos parece muy
lejano,
difícil,
¿no? Nos distraemos demasiado, entonces nos parece como muy lejano, pero la paz interior es algo que ya está dentro de ti y hay una forma muy fácil de acceder a ella y este maestro te enseña cómo. Prem Rawat ha dado conferencias en la ONU, en universidades, en parlamentos. Interesante, porque eso no